there is basically an investment famine. I mean, investment has, the growth of investment, fixed capital formation has collapsed. So between 2003 to 8, it was growing at about 15% a year. Now it's growing at about 5% a year. That's a third. And if you look at corporate investment, which was actually the driver of what happened in the high growth period, that is at a standstill. And projects are being stalled all over the place. In addition to the deterioration of the macroeconomic environment, there is a souring of the investment climate. And why has that happened? Well, all of you will know that until very recently, the government seemed to be paralyzed. There was no action on reform. There was a daily revelation of scams and scandals. And the importance of scams and scandals is, of course, they are a bad thing, and therefore it's a good thing that they are being exposed. However, their short-term impact is that to delay everything. There is, of course, on top of all this, and very importantly, a structural element to the slowdown. Because I think from 2003 to 2008, India wasted the boom, essentially. There was a lot of luck there because the global economy was booming. For 5 years, Indian agriculture was doing extremely well. There were no droughts or anything like that. Oil prices were low. So the environment was very good. A lot of reform had taken place before, between 1991 and 2003. And on the back of all that, we had that amazing 9% growth. But during that period of 2003 to 8, there was practically no genuine reform. And now, of course, now that the whole thing has soured, that is going to tell, because we are now back to all the problems of the Indian economy that have been there, we know are there. For example, infrastructure, public sector enterprises, the lack of fiscal consolidation, labor laws, land law, I can go on. There has been very little action on any of these fronts. And therefore, to get back to, I think getting back to 5 or 6% growth will happen, there's no doubt about that. 6 or even possibly 6.5, 7. But getting back to anything like a sustainable rate of growth of 8 or 9, I think this is not on unless there's a massive second wave of reform.
And I think India is in exactly the same position, by the way, as much of the world, actually. And for far be it, it's in a much better situation. Because, of course, the growth rate is low, 5, 6%. It's still the third fastest growing economy in the world. That's just the reality of the world we live in. I think the second thing is that there are 3 pillars to growth. There is the consumer, there is the entrepreneur, and there is the government. The consumer in India is alive and well. She has been awakened. She has tasted a better quality of life with the last 20 or 30 years of reform. And by God, the media doesn't let her forget it. So she is going to be a voice for change. Her aspirations are there for herself, but even much more for her future generations. You will feel that force of the consumer in the polls because she's also the voter. As far as the entrepreneur is concerned, India has got a real culture of entrepreneurship, and thankfully that is alive and well again.
One of the more encouraging things about growth rates across the Indian states is that some of the fastest growing states in the last 3 or 4 years have been amongst the poorest states. But the real difficulty is that when you have very poor states like the Bihars and the Orissas and the Uttar Pradeshes, even if they were growing at double the rates of some of their more prosperous counterparts, that is still not enough to actually make up for the growth in poverty in those states. So this is a major problem, is that the gulf between states in India had already widened to such an extent by by the time the economy started growing at faster rates, that it's going to remain a persistent problem.